I would like to acknowledge that this video is being filmed on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander or First Nations people who may be watching this video today. Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a Books Beside My Bed video for you where I'll wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading, and this one is going to be quite a long one, so please go get yourself something to eat or drink and get comfy because I read a lot this week. When I'm stressed, I stop adulting and I read. And I had a weekend where I just had to stop adulting and read, and then I had a public holiday where I actually did some work in the morning and then I had to stop and just read. So yeah, this video is going to be long. This is also the first week that I have been playing my November TBR game, which I will leave linked on the screen. I read 14 books this week. Okay, books is a loose term. Books, manga, graphic novels, kids title, like all of that is in this video. I read a lot of things. So before we start talking about any of that, this is my reading week from the 29th of October until the 4th of November. I read a total of 14 things. It equated to 4,649 pages, and my yearly reading total is 526 books. I'm going to preface this by saying I read a lot of manga because I decided on the 1st of November that I was going to attempt to do 30 and 30, which is Shae and Izzy's month-long manga readathon, and here we are. We can't say that I make good life choices for myself because occasionally I just like to throw myself under the bus. So I will mention some of the manga that I have read so far, but I'm not actually going to go into depth with any of them unless they are specifically for my November TBR game. And then I will have a separate mid-month and end-of-month wrap-up for manga because there's probably going to be a lot more in there, and I figured that'll be an easy way to do it. So we're going to try that out. You can let me know in the comments if you think that's a good idea or not. 3 of the books that I read this week were children's titles for review. So I received the second book in Ando's The Champ series. And because I hadn't read the first one, I actually just picked up a copy of the first book as well. So there's The Champ and then there's The Champ Rock and Roll. These are junior fiction titles about a girl called Summer who idolizes her older brother, who is a sporting champ. And then when there is this meteor shower, which I think is the same meteor shower from Smarty Pup when I reviewed that, she ends up getting these superpowers from some purple goo that turns up. And in that same incident, her brother is injured and ends up paraplegic. And so the two of them are trying to cope with their new lives. Summer is putting her love of sports to good use. There is a villain who is a witch who is just very unhappy with people being happy, and she is Summer's nemesis for the first 2 books. They were really fun. Kids will really enjoy these, and I am interested to see what Ando does with this series. There is another middle grade title. This one is Berani by Michelle Kadarusman, and this one is set in Indonesia. It features 3 characters, Marley, Ari, and Ginger Juice, who is an orangutan who lives in a cage in Ari's uncle's restaurant. And so this whole book is about environmentalism, about activism. Marley is Indonesian Canadian via her parents, and she is at school and she's given a presentation around palm oil, and this causes her some trouble because it is a controversial topic to discuss in Indonesia, and it lands her in hot water with her school. Ari works at his uncle's restaurant, and he has grown up with Ginger Juice since she was a baby orangutan, but he is increasingly feeling sorrier and sorrier for her being stuck inside this cage. And eventually Marley and Ari end up crossing paths and talking, and they find a way to ensure that Ginger Juice is safe. Marley learns that standing up for her principles has consequences, and she has to learn to accept that. So a really interesting middle grade title, perfect conversation starter for kids. So worth checking out. Thank you to Ellen and Unwin for the review copies. In terms of the manga that I read this week that were not part of my TBR game, I read Fire in His Fingertips Volume 3 and 4, so stay tuned, I'll talk about those. I also read Love Nest Volume 1. They will come, I think, next week or the weekend after. I will have a catch-up mid-month manga video. Before my TBR game started, I read The Hit by Julie Weaver. This is Team Zulu Book 1. I did read the Christmas novella last week for this series. This one is about an ex-special forces hitman who now works for the mafia, who is sent a job to kill the sister of a man who owes the mafia money. However, he disagrees with this. He ends up kidnapping her and taking her away to his cabin in the mountains that no one knows about to keep her safe. So there's a forced proximity element here. He is very much an alpha character, but the heroine definitely does hold her own and is very unhappy with the situation and with her brother. Rightly so. I will say this one has content warnings for discussions around drug addiction, for the kidnapping, for neglectful parenting, for PTSD, and for gun violence. The second book in the series, The Payback, takes place partly in the same timeline as the hit. There is some crossover, and when you read the book, the part that is the crossover seems to rush through, but that's because you've read it in the first book. So I would probably read these in order rather than read them as standalones. You can read them as standalones. I think you probably get more information for this book in the first one. The hero in this is a former teammate of the hero from the first book. He is ex-special forces, he's a hacker, and he discovers that his new neighbor has been blackmailed by the mafia into working for them, and he wants to get her out of that deal because she's unhappy. She doesn't want to be doing it. So the two of them end up joining forces to try and bring down the head of this mafia group. This one does feature content warnings for human trafficking, for PTSD, for death of family members, and for gun violence. So I thoroughly enjoyed these romantic suspense books. They were very enjoyable for me, and I'm looking forward to reading more of Julie Weaver's work in the future. Then I read Archangel's Resurrection by Nalini Singh. This is the 15th book in the Guild Hunter series. I have a complete video for it. I will leave it linked on the screen. Definitely go and check that out. This is Alexander and Zanaya's story. It is an epic love story between two archangels that spans millennia. I thoroughly enjoyed it. This one felt very much like a standalone story within the greater world arc. Like, lots of the major events from the Guild Hunter series take place over the course of their lives because they've been alive for that long. And so their story felt nestled in between all of that. And having sat with it for a couple of days now, I still really thoroughly enjoy it. I think it stands a little bit apart from the rest of the series, but it's still integrated into that main story arc as well. So I was thrilled to have this book, to be perfectly honest. I also read A Bump In Boohail by Kimberly Lemming. This is a Mead Realm short story. This is Cinnamon and Fallon celebrating Samhain, and it features pranks and the Dragon's Hoard, and it was just very short and delightful. I also read Hollow Grove by Lee Jacquot, which I think is Holy Knights 4. I saw this recommended by Izzy. It is a Halloween story. It is a best friend's brother trope, sort of hate/animosity, annoyance to love sort of story between Evelyn, who is roped into helping her best friend set up this Halloween murder mystery event for her co-workers in this old mansion, and she is forced to work alongside her best friend's brother, who they've always had this sort of very annoying relationship with one another. But Dorian is very attracted to Evelyn. He also reveals that he's a pleasure dom, and this one is super steamy but great. Very short, highly entertaining, very atmospheric for the Halloween season, and I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. I also picked up Power by Margaret McIser, which is a contemporary forbidden romance between a 25-year-old single mother who also is a high-end escort and the President of the United States. So the backstory for this, the President was inaugurated, and then 8 days later, something like that, his wife actually passed away from a congenital heart disease that she didn't know that she had. And he really hasn't been with anyone since then, and ends up hiring this escort, and her name is Reese, and he likes that she doesn't take crap from him. He is very alpha, and she just pushes back because she's used to that from clients. It's interesting because we see a lot of scenes with her and her daughter I think is 10 years old, and some of the reviews I've seen have been said that the daughter sounds like she's older than 10 years old. Having known quite a few 10-year-olds, you do actually get 10-year-olds who do know quite a bit and who do take things in their stride and who do process things like an adult. So that part didn't bother me so much. There were times when I felt like Bennett, who was the president, was just a little bit over the top. For the most part, I was just turning pages, and it was an entertaining read. Aside from the death of a spouse as a content warning, there is also an assault on page, not between the hero and the heroine. There is mentions of childhood sexual abuse. There is severely negligent and basically horrific parenting on the part of Reese when she was younger. There is also a mass shooting and discussion around gun violence. Okay, then we finally move into the start of my TBR game. The very first book that I decided to read for it was The Culmination of Everything by Christina C. Jones. This one was for the prompt HEA Avenue, which was one of Heather's prompts, and it was to read a tried and true author. This one is about Ben and Kyle. Kyle is a very successful surgeon whose husband and daughter have passed away, and she's come to this small town to go hiking and just to get away from everything and to try and sort out what she's going to do with the rest of her life. And on her first day there hiking, she has an accident. Ben, the local park ranger, finds her and gets her to the local doctors. And when Kyle later meets Ben in person, he is very gruff, very put out by her, and is generally annoyed by her presence. They meet again and they're forced to spend time together because there is a storm and they get caught out in it. Despite the fact that Ben is kind of annoyed by Kyle, he's also attracted to her and she's attracted to him, and they have this one night stand that eventually turns into something more. Both of these characters are dealing and healing from trauma, from death of loved ones, and they're both trying to find their place really in the world. I did really love this one. I'm going to put spoilers on the screen just while I talk about the content warnings, because it's kind of a point that's not really brought up until later in the book, but I think it is really important. I'm not someone who cares about content warnings as spoilers, but I feel like I need to mention it. So I'll leave the spoilers on the screen until I'm done. So Reese's husband and daughter were killed in a school shooting. Trigger warnings for that, for gun violence, all of that. I feel like that's important to mention because I hadn't seen it anywhere else, and it's not a trigger for me, but I know it would be for some people. Then I read Lore Olympus Volume 3. This was one of my chance card prompts to read a graphic novel. This had just come in. It is the continuation of Hades and Persephone's story. She has started working for Hades and everything gets complicated and people start suspecting things, and I just continue to love this. It's gorgeous. The artwork is fantastic. I love all of the characters in it, and I'm very, very excited to continue when Volume 4 is released. I also read Blood Moon by Gillian Graves. This is part of the Strange Moon series. I read this for the challenge to read a new release. So this is about Hazel and Vlad. Hazel owns a bar for supernaturals. She is a witch, and the way that her magic expresses itself is through potions, and in her case, her potions are cocktails. She is finding it really frustrating at the moment because across the road from her, another supernatural bar has opened, this one catering to supernaturals and humans, and they are employing some rather nasty marketing techniques that are pulling her customers away, but also causing disturbances around her store. She's really annoyed by it. She goes to a party hosted by one of her friends. She ends up having a one-night stand with a vampire called Vlad, and then finds out that he is the manager of the bar across the road. Turns out he's not responsible for the marketing, and the two of them end up working together to try and resolve what's going on. This was short, steamy. I enjoyed this more than I enjoyed Titan. So I did like Titan, and I mentioned that there was nothing wrong with it, but I actually really enjoyed this story a whole lot more than that. So I'm glad that I gave Gillian Graves a second chance. Then I finally read You and Me by Tal Bauer. This is a book that's been on my Kindle Unlimited TBR for ages. I read this for the Unicorn Lane prompt to read a queer book. Unicorn Lane was one of Heather's cards, and it was to read a queer book, and I loved this so much. This is an romance between two single dads who have teenage boys who play football, American football. The entire book is told from the perspective of Luke. Luke's wife has died, and he has a really terrible relationship with his son, and he doesn't quite know where it all went wrong. And in an effort to try and form a better relationship with his son, he decides to become a parent volunteer for the football team. Sorry, I'm mixing my Australian and American football terms because I don't know anything about either of them. Anyway, there he meets Landon, who is one of the only dads who volunteers. And so the two become really good friends, and Landon is out and proud of that, and his son is very proud of him, and Luke envies that relationship that Landon has with his son. But as Luke and Landon develop this friendship that mirrors the friendship that their boys have. Their boys are best friends. Luke begins to realize that he has feelings more than friendship, and he'd never considered himself anything other than straight, so this is something that he's exploring. But what I really loved about this is that Luke doesn't get hung up on the fact that he might be bisexual. He embraces it. He recognizes that Landon is an incredible person, someone that he's falling in love with, and there's this really great discussion between the two of them because Landon can't believe that Luke is not struggling with this. And it's not to say that he doesn't at all. There are moments where he doesn't know how to explain that relationship to other people because it is still new to Luke, but there wasn't a whole huge amount of angst around that. And it actually made this relationship really, really adorable and just so sweet and wholesome, and I loved it so much. And the sons were awesome, and the way that they knew about the relationship before their dads even told them was great, and it was just so good. So I picked this up as a recommendation from Robyn, and I'm so glad that I read it for this week. It was just great. It's going to be one of my favorite books from the year. Then I read a manga for my TBR game, and this was Sacrificial Princess and the King of Beasts. I read volume 1. It is by Yu Tomofuji, I think. And this was for the Manga Plaza prompt to read a Shae favorite. It was one of Shae's cards, and she had recommended it to me. She told me it was a Beauty and the Beast retelling. She thought I would really like it. And it is adorable. The artwork in this is stunning. Basically, the heroine of the story is the sacrifice to the King of Beasts, but she's not like the other sacrifices in that she kind of is taking everything in her stride. She's amazed by everything around her. She talks to the King of Beasts and he's kind of taken by surprise by the fact that she's not cowering in fear. And then he decides to keep her in the castle. And all of his advisors are really frustrated by this because they don't want a human there, because none of them are human and humans are seen as sacrifices only. But he really likes her and he keeps her around, and she just is this ray of sunshine. Like it's grumpy sunshine, and it's adorable. So I loved it. I will be continuing. Then I read my first Kylie Scott book. It was Lick. It is Stage Dive book 1. This was one of all the members choose cards. Nicole had recommended Rockstar, and I picked a Rockstar romance because of course I did. I've been meaning to read Kylie Scott, and this was just one that's been sitting on my Kindle for ages. So yay. I've got it done, and now I've got a whole stack of physical Kylie Scott books that I need to read because I will be continuing. This is about Evelyn, who wakes up in her Las Vegas hotel room bathroom next to a gorgeous guy with a wedding ring on her finger, and she promptly freaks out. She doesn't even know who this guy is, and then when she gets home she realizes that she married the lead guitarist for the very famous rock band Stage Dive, and there is a little bit of backwards and forwards because the media get hold of it and she is hounded, and he brings her back out to Los Angeles. None of them are really happy because she doesn't remember anything, and David is really frustrated that she doesn't, and we slowly learn throughout the book why he's so frustrated, because they had this great connection, and he loved the fact that she didn't treat him any differently to anyone else because she had no idea who he was. There are a lot of ups and downs as these two have to navigate this relationship under the spotlight. There are some things to do with one of David's past girlfriends who is intent on causing trouble between the two of them. It's not a perfect book. There are some scenes in here that will probably frustrate a lot of people. It's definitely not a favorite book, but it was one that I really enjoyed, and I really want to read more Kylie Scott because of it, because if nothing else, this was just something that was lighthearted and easy to read, and I enjoyed it. Then I read The Wedding Crasher by Mia Sosa. This is the follow-up to The Worst Best Man, and we see some of those characters as side characters in this book. It is a traditionally published rom-com, and I have to say, after having read now a lot of indie published romances over the last 12 months, even longer, between when I first read my first traditionally published rom-com, you can kind of tell the difference. And it's not to say that this is a bad book, because I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun. But the beats that the books are hitting are really different, and yeah, it was just something I noticed. That said, it was highly enjoyable. We have Solange, who accidentally crashes a wedding and stops the wedding in its tracks when she realizes the bride does not want to marry the groom, and she can't stand by. She just has to say something. Then she's surprised when neither the bride or the groom are upset that she's done this, and that the groom, who was the one who didn't know anything about it, is actually kind of grateful about it and just takes it in his stride and goes on with his day. Dean is a lawyer. He has a very clear future path mapped out for himself. He doesn't like to deviate from it. And while this has thrown a bit of a roadblock in his path, he's determined to move past it, and he wants to make partner. And in order to do that, he has to take around a potential new employee and show her and her girlfriend the sights of the city. Somewhere along the way, it's determined that he needs to have a fake girlfriend to do this, and so he calls in a favor from Solange and asks her to be his fake girlfriend. So the two spend a lot of time together getting to know each other, which then gets complicated when she needs a fake boyfriend, and the two continue the ruse past the time that they were going to end it. You know, it was interesting seeing how these two, who have very polar opposite expectations of life, what they want to do with their life. They do have things in common, but in terms of the path that they want to take to get there, they're very different, and they have to navigate that, and then they have to navigate the real feelings that develop and all of the weird, wacky circumstances of family and friends and work enemies and whatever, finding out the truth. Like it was very interesting, and I had a great time reading it. So I'm glad that I finally picked it up, because it was one of my anticipated reads from the year, and it just took me forever to get there, but I've done it. So I'm grateful. All right, so those are the books that I've read, and now we're really quickly going to run through the next rolls from my TBR game. So I'm really sorry that this is so long, but you know, we're going to go with it. I know I said I was only going to do 3 to 5 rolls, but because I read so many books this week, I ended up doing another 10 rolls just to keep going, because I actually found having lots of choices meant that I was picking things up faster. I wasn't agonizing over reading in order or anything like that. So more choice for me works better. All right, so we are going to continue with the next couple of rolls for the game. So if you caught up with my TikTok roll, I ended up on physical TBR. So that's where we're going to start for the next few rolls. 6. 1, 2, 3. Happy Street. Here's one of Megan's cards. Let's just find it. There we go. And a 6. So a holiday read. So my first roll landed me on Happy Street, which is one of Megan's cards, and that had the prompt to read a holiday read, which is great. So I have, oh, I forgot to go and grab it, Christmas Fairy Tale by Corinne Maziel, which is a very short novella. I have a physical copy of it, so I'm going to read that. All right, next roll is a 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And oh, okay, a review copy. Roll number 2 landed me on review copy, and for this I'm going to read West Side Love Story by Priscilla Oliveras, which is a book that I've had on my Neck Alley TBR for ages. I just need to read it. So we're going to read that. 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Heather, you are very popular in this game, clearly. So we're back on HEA Avenue. And for 1, which is new to you author. Roll number 3 landed me back on HEA Avenue, which was one of Heather's properties, and for this it was to read a new to you author. So for this one, I'm going to try and read Black by T.L. Smith. T.L. Smith is an author that I met at Books Insight Melbourne, and I didn't really know much about her books. I know she's going to Rare, so I want to at least try and read 1 or 2 of her books before I get to Rare, so that I can actually have more of a conversation with her about them. So Black seemed like a good place to start. I don't know if it was her first book. I think it might have been, so I figured that would be a good place to start. Oh, that rolled off, but it was a 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. New release. Okay, the next roll landed me on new release. For this, I'm going to read Bad Deal by Annabeth Albert. This is the next book in the A-List Security series. And 2. 1, 2 is one of my chance cards. Oh, manga. Very appropriate for this month. The next roll landed me on the prompt to read another manga, so I'm just going to choose one of my 30 in 30 manga books. I don't know which one's going to read. I've got a whole list of things to take out on KU. I'm not going to be short of any things to read, so I will let you know what I pick when I read it. 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That is another of Megan's cards. 5. Ooh, food on the cover. The next roll landed me back on another one of Megan's squares. This one is Chaos Loop, and for this I landed on the prompt to read a book with food on the cover. And for this, because it is Thanksgiving for my friends over in the States, I'm going to read A Match Made for Thanksgiving by Jackie Lau. I've had this one for ages. I don't celebrate Thanksgiving, but hey, look, there's food on the cover and we're going to go with it. That's my nod to all my friends overseas. Okay. 3. 1, 2, 3. So still on Megan's prompts, this time with Happy Street. Okay. 6. A holiday read. All right, we're back on Happy Street, which is Megan's card. And we also got another holiday read, which is fine because I need to read my Christmas books before Christmas so that I can recommend them in December. For this, I'm going to read Christmas on the 13th Floor by Lee Jacquot, which is the first book in the Holy Night series. So I read the Halloween one. So we're going to go with that. 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Marvel Drive. All right, so these are Tracy's prompts. 2. Single parent. The next roll landed me on Marvel Drive, which is one of Tracy's properties. And for this, the prompt was to read a single parent romance. And for this, I'm going to read Rafe by Rebecca Weatherspoon, which I've also had for ages, have not read, and I need to. Okay, hopefully last roll for this week. 1, 2, 3. Bree Bullard. So that's one of Bree's properties. Oh, I should probably move that one another way. That would make more sense, wouldn't it? 2. Buddy read a book with Bree, which is very fitting. Okay, next prompt landed me on Bree Boulevard, which is one of Bree's prompts. I will leave everyone linked down below, so if you're not sure who anyone is, they'll be linked. The challenge that I landed on was to buddy read a book with Bree, which is great timing because I'm supposed to be starting while I'm filming. The newest Alexis Hall book, Paristelum Court, is about to crumble, and, you know, perfect fit for this prompt. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 12. Okay. Alona Andrews Avenue. Okay, so this is one of Kirsty's cards. 5, magic. And the final roll for this week so far, aside from my TikTok roll, which will come out at some point, is Alona Andrews Drive, which feature Kirsty's prompts. And the prompt that I landed on was magic. And for this, I am planning on reading Wicked Nights by MJ Scott, which is the 3rd book in the Tech Witch series. And I have the physical copy that I got signed at Books Inside Melbourne, so I would like to catch up on that and get that one back on my shelf. I'm very happy with all of these books. So this was a very long video and an absolute whirlwind, so thank you for sticking around if you got this far. If you did get this far, feel free to leave a book stack emoji to let me know that you're here, or feel free to share something that you have finished reading recently, or if you want to just chat to me about the books that I've read, I'm happy, very, very happy to have those conversations down below. I hope that wherever you're in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.